Why? Confusion. Downtown, traffic, confusion. President had just been shot. And the bus was going too slow for Oswald, so he got off the bus at 12:44. Got on this bus at 12:40, he wasn't making any progress, he was getting nervous, he gets off the bus at 12:44. After he leaves the bus, he walks a very short distance to a nearby Greyhound bus company. Now there's a difference. This was a city bus. The Greyhound bus does what for you? Takes you out of town, or it's a traveling bus. So he walks to a nearby Greyhound bus station. He doesn't get on a Greyhound bus. He hails down a taxi cab at 12:48. Why would there be taxi cabs there? Because people get off the Greyhound bus, or they get on the Greyhound bus, and they would take a taxi to get to the bus station. So there's taxis in that area. So he walks down to the Greyhound bus station and gets in a taxi cab at 12:48. How do we know that? The taxi driver, William Whaley, testified to that. Okay, the taxi driver, a guy by the name of William Whaley, testifies to that. When Oswald gets in the taxi at the Greyhound bus station at 12:48, he asked the taxi cab driver, William Whaley, to take him, and this is on your ID sheet, it's important, take him to the 500 block of North Beckley Street in the Oak Cliff suburb of Dallas. So he gets in the cab and he asked William Whaley to take him to the 500 block of North Beckley Street in the suburb of Oak Cliff, which is a suburb of Dallas. So does he live in Dallas, in downtown Dallas area? No, he lives in Oak Cliff, which is a suburb. Not too far away, but it is a suburb. So at 12:48 p.m., Oswald hails a taxi. He asks the taxi driver, William Whaley, to take him to the 500 block of North Beckley Street in the Oak Cliff suburb of Dallas. Well, what happens when you get into a taxi? What's the taxi driver normally do? Guys just strike up a conversation. And he says to Oswald, I wonder what the hell this uproar is all about. He testifies that that's what he says to Oswald. I wonder what the hell this uproar is all about. Well, Whaley later stated that Oswald didn't even answer him, didn't say a word, so he figured he was just one of those guys that doesn't like to talk when he's in a taxi. Oswald's a very quiet guy, and you'll learn more about that. So he tries to strike up a conversation by saying, I wonder what the hell this uproar is all about, and Oswald simply doesn't answer, and Whaley figures he's not talking. Well, this is kind of interesting. At 12:54 p.m., Oswald was dropped off at the 700 block of North Beckley Street, on the corner of Neely and Beckley Streets. This will all make sense to you when we get done. So instead of being dropped off at the 500 block, he asked Whaley to drop him off at the 700 block and drop him off at the corner of Neely Street and Beckley Street, which was actually 3 blocks beyond where he wanted to be dropped off. Why would he do that?
So there's people in his house?
Yeah, so he could walk back so nobody knew where he was dropped off. You shoot the president, you're going to have yourself dropped off exactly where you want. What was on the 500 block of North Beckley was a boarding house that he was staying in. He and his wife were separated. We'll talk about that later. What's a boarding house? It's a big house that people rent out rooms, right? And he lived in a boarding house on the 500 block of North Beckley. So as Macklin said, this guy's not dumb. You're going to learn more about him. So instead of getting dropped off, he gets dropped off on the 700 block, gets off, says bye, and then walks back. So the cab driver can't say where he went, right? If you think about it. Well, he walks back to his boarding house. The address of his boarding house is 1026 North Beckley Street, and he arrives there at 1 o'clock. Ironically, what happened at 1 o'clock as he arrived at his boarding house? The president was pronounced dead. Think about that. So, back at Parkland, we're having that happen, while Oswald is arriving at his boarding house at 1026 North Beckley Street at 1 o'clock. What's he do? Goes into the boarding house, goes to his room, he picks up what's called a light Eisenhower jacket. Anybody know what that is? Anybody know what an Eisenhower jacket is? The adult class, it's funny, they know what that is because they're old. It was a kind of a cool, like what's a fancy jacket? What's kind of a cool modern jacket you wear now? I don't know, Hurley or what do you call it? But this was kind of a nice, Eisenhower jacket was in style. It was a little kind of a shortcut jacket, a light jacket. Picked that up. And he also picked up, kiddos, his .38 caliber revolver. And he leaves the boarding house at 1:03. He arrives at 1 o'clock, walks in, goes to his room, grabs his light Eisenhower jacket, his .38 caliber revolver, and leaves at 1:03. How do we know that? One of the cleaning ladies at the boarding house, a gal by the name of Earlene Roberts, one of the housekeepers there, saw him come in and saw him leave. The only thing she knew he left with was what? The jacket. Okay? She knew he changed and grabbed a new jacket. Now, how do we know that? Because Earlene Roberts said so. Here's a quote. This was according to Earlene Roberts, a housekeeper for one of the residents, who was later quoted as saying, quote, Oswald was not running, but using a fast walk when he entered the boarding house. He went out walking fast the same way as I was listening to the broadcast about Kennedy. Okay? Well, he leaves the boarding house and he walks towards the bus stop that was just yards away. The same bus stop he used every day to what? Get to work. So I've been there from the front door of the boarding house to that bus stop's probably from here to the corner of those lockers. That's all how far there is, because that house is the second house in on the block. So he walks towards that bus stop. Now here's the thing. From this point on, from that point until 1:15 p.m., those 12 minutes, nobody in history knows the route he took. But he did end up at 10th and Patton Avenue in Oak Cliff. And I'll tell you why we know that. So from 1:03 to 1:15, nobody in the world knows for sure the route he took. But he ended up on the corner of 10th and Patton Avenue in Oak Cliff at 1:15. That makes sense so far? Now, if you look at his location at 10th and Patton and Oak Cliff, he's less than a mile from his boarding house and approximately 2 miles from the assassination scene. So he's about a little short of a mile from his boarding house, but 2 miles from Daley Plaza where he shot the president. That kind of gives you an idea of where he's at. How do we know this? Not yet, but good. On patrol in his police car at the time that Oswald arrived at 10th and Patton was a Dallas police officer by the name of J.D. Tippett. J.D. Tippett was on patrol, cruising in his patrol car, and what's he listening to? He's listening to the description from the police radio. Now this is a weird story, and I don't have an explanation for you very well. But it's not quite, I'm gonna back up a little bit. It's between 1:03 and 1:15. It's not 1:15 yet, okay? In the meantime, while Oswald's making his way from the boarding house to 10th and Patton, J.D. Tippett's cruising. And he hears this description of the guy that's shot the president. So he stops his patrol car in front of the Top 10 record store in Oak Cliff. And he goes in and he asks customers to get out of his way, and he uses the telephone there to make a call. So as Oswald is moving from his boarding house to 10th and Patton, J.D. Tippett, the police officers, heard this description of this man missing from the school book depository that maybe shot the president, and he pulls right in front of the Top 10 record store, which is exactly today as it was then. I'll show you pictures, it's incredible. Looks like you're walking into the 60s. And he makes a phone call. The phone is still there. It's non-working, but still there. Nobody has any idea to this day who he talked to, or what he talked about. But after the call, he got back in his patrol car and he continued to travel looking for this man that he received a description on that may have shot the president. Now this next handout you really need to get out in front of you because it's going to tell you what happens here. And it's kind of a goofy map that I drew, but it's pretty good. Third or fourth one in. You can definitely see it's a homemade map here. It's after Cecil McWaters' picture of that bus ticket that Oswald purchased. There you go. Now, just kind of look at it as we talk about this. At 1:15 p.m., Officer Tippett sees Oswald walking and stops him on 10th Street. Now, if you look at your map here, it's a little confusing. He's walking this way. It says Oswald walking. He is walking this way on Patton, and Tippett stops him on 10th Street, not Patton, 10th Street. He's walking down 10th Street. Why is he stopping? Why is he stopping, Sager? Why is he stopping? He looks like this guy that he heard over the radio. Okay? So he stops him. Now you got to picture this. Oswald is walking this way. Tippett pulls the police car up right here on this side of him. Okay? And so Tippett's obviously on the driver's side, right? Okay. Tippett stops the patrol car. He beckons Oswald to come to his vehicle. Oswald complies with the officer's request. He walks over to the he walks over to the passenger side, puts his hands inside the window, and asks what he needed. Well, Tippett asked him to walk around the front of the vehicle. So Tippett says, hey, he's leaning inside the vehicle. Tippett says, hey, come around the front. Tippett gets out of his car and he walks around the front of his vehicle so he can confront and talk to Oswald. So if you can picture that, he's walking out this way and Tippett's walking out this way. Well, as Tippett starts to get around the front of his vehicle, and this would be me looking at Morgan because he's on the other side, Oswald pulls that .38 caliber pistol out of his waistband and he shoots Officer Tippett 3 times across the hood of the police car. And Tippett goes down. So if you can picture this, I'll go the other way. Oswald is walking this way. Tippett pulls up next to him. He confronts him. Oswald leans in on the passenger side. Tippett says, hey, would you come around the front? Tippett gets out. Oswald starts around the front. As soon as Tippett gets across the hood of that car, he pulls that .38 special out and shoots him 3 times in the body. Tippett goes down. He had been hit once in the chest and twice in the stomach. And he's laying on that side of the patrol car. What does Oswald do? He walks around the front of the car, takes one more, puts it right in Tippett's head. Shoots Tippett's 4 times, deader than a doorknob, over the top of that car. So I'll repeat that again. Officer Tippett believes this man that is walking fits the description of the missing employee from the Texas School Book Depository. He stops his patrol car and beckons Oswald to come to his vehicle. Oswald complies with the officer's request. He walks over to the passenger side of the patrol car, leans on the passenger side window. Tippett then asks him to come around the front of the car. He steps out of the car himself, walks around the front. As he walks towards the front of the vehicle, Oswald pulls out the .38 caliber revolver, shoots Tippett 3 times across the hood of the police car, once in the chest, twice in the stomach, then circles to the front of the patrol car and fires a final shot in Tippett's temple, killing him instantly. How do we know that? Helen Markham. This lady is standing on the corner of 10th and Patton and watches the entire thing. Can you imagine that? So the shooting of Officer Tippett is witnessed by Helen Markham. She's standing on the corner of 10th Street and Patton Avenue. Now, you have to look at your map kind of, but so Oswald was walking this way, right? The car comes up here, he shoots him, now he turns and walks this way. And who's he walking right toward who's standing at the intersection of Patton and 10th? He's walking right at Helen Markham, right at her. You can imagine it. She is so scared and terrified by what she witnessed, She thinks she's going to be shot. She simply stands there and puts both hands over her eyes, thinking that she's a goner. Puts both hands over her eyes as he walks towards her. Oswald passes by, doesn't say anything, and empties the spent shell casings in the grass as he's departing Mrs. Markham. Okay? He's got a .38 caliber revolver, and he opens it up as he's walking past Mrs. Markham and empties the spent shell casings from his pistol on the grass. Well, 2 minutes later at 1:17 p.m., a fellow by the name of Temple Bowley, and all these people, if you're interested, Luke Mooney, Eugene Booth, J.C. Day, here's Temple Bowley. Temple Bowley's driving around with his 12-year-old daughter, and he discovers Officer Tippett lying next to his police car, wondering what is the story here. So at 1:17 p.m., Temple Bowley and his 12-year-old daughter discover Officer Tippett lying next to his police car as they're driving by. What does Bowley do? Stops and leaves his 12-year-old in the car because he knows something's not right here. Okay? So he stops and leaves his daughter in the car, sees what the story is, gets on the police radio in Tippett's car, and calls in the location of the fallen officer. 1:17 p.m., Temple Bowley, 12-year-old daughter with him, discover Tippett laying next to his car. He stops his car, leaves his daughter in the car because he just wanted to see what the deal is. Walks up and sees the story on Tippett, gets on the police radio, and calls in the location of the fallen officer. Weirdly enough, after he made the radio call, he didn't hang around. I think he thought Tippett was dead, obviously. So he and his daughter left, waiting, I guess, for the police to get there. Some people don't like to get involved, you know what I mean? And he did, and I don't know what his thinking was, you know. I think he thought he was dead. Well, the next person to see Lee Harvey Oswald as he's departing the corner of 10th and Patton is a guy by the name of Ted Calloway. Ted Calloway is the next to see him. And if you follow that map, you can kind of see where Oswald is going. It'll make sense to you. Now, Calloway owned a used car lot on the corner of Patton and Jefferson Avenue. And again, you can see that on your map. Okay? It says used car lot. Well, why did he come that direction? Why did he walk towards 10th and Patton? He heard shots. So he walked towards 10th and Patton, and he encountered Oswald on Patton Street after he had walked away from Mrs. Markham. And I think I put on that map, did I not? Where Ted Calloway encountered Oswald. Well, according to Calloway in a later affidavit, he said Oswald was holding a gun, quote, in the raised pistol position, like this. That's what he said. Oswald was fleeing the scene and had the rifle in the raised pistol position as he encountered him, where you see on that map. Calloway shouted at Oswald when he saw him. He said, "Hey man, what the hell is going on?" Oswald simply muttered something that was unrecognizable and immediately turned west down an alley. You can see the route he's taken down the alley from there. What'd Calloway do? No, good. That would be, you'd have a 50-50 chance. Instead of following him, what did he do? He went to the sound of the firing, okay? And he didn't know that Temple Bowley was already there, so what did Calloway do? He got on the police radio and called for help as well, and he was told by dispatch that somebody had already called in the shooting to stay off that radio, and the police were on their way. Okay, so he walks, not after Oswald, but to the side where the firing went, and gets on the radio and does the same thing. Now this is where it gets kind of crazy, and we'll quit for the day. You know what he does next? After they tell him to stay off the radio, he picks up Tippett's gun that's laying on the ground, hails down a taxi cab that was driven by William Scoggins, and those two guys drive around the neighborhood looking for Lee Harvey Oswald. That's the difference in police those days and ours. You wouldn't do that now. That probably wasn't that uncommon. So Calloway picks up Tippett's gun, which is still lying next to him, and hails down a taxi cab driven by William Scoggins. And they simply drove the neighborhood looking for the murderer, which they never found him. Now, if you look at this map I gave you, where's Oswald now? What's he doing? He's heading down an alley. And somebody said something about he threw off his coat. Who said that? Well, he's going to do that. But we'll talk about that tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll finish the route of Oswald until he is captured. But how many people knew that he had shot a police officer during this whole thing? Not many people do. And that's why we teach it to you.